You talk too much. You're done here.
You talk too much. You're done here. Those 5 words erased 19 years of loyal service in less than 10 seconds. No handshake, no thank you, not even a glance, just a folder pushed across a glass desk and a security guard already waiting by the door. What the young executive standing behind that desk didn't know was this. The quiet, grey haired driver he had just fired carried a forgotten truth from the past, one that, when it was finally revealed, would turn his dismissal into the biggest mistake the company had ever made. Now let's go back to where it all began. 19 years earlier, Ramon Cabrera stood in the parking garage of Whitfield Logistics, holding a set of car keys that didn't feel like his own. At 41, he had left behind a fishing town in Iloilo, a wife who believed in him more than he believed in himself, and a son too young to understand why his father was leaving. Driving for a wealthy family wasn't the life Ramon had imagined, but it was steady, and steady was enough. He learned quickly that the job wasn't about turning a wheel. It was about memorizing routes, memorizing moods, memorizing silence. Mr. Whitfield, the company's founder, was a hard man to read, but he trusted Ramon with something rarer than a paycheck. His son, 8-year-old Dylan Whitfield, rode in the back seat every morning, headphones on, were tuned out. He rarely spoke to Ramon beyond a mumbled hi. His parents were always working, always traveling, always somewhere else. The only person who asked Dylan how his day was every single day was the driver. Rough day at school? Ramon would ask. You wouldn't get it. Dylan usually replied, try me. Ramon would say, and eventually Dylan did. Slowly, the silence in the back seat turned into conversation. Ramon told him stories about the Philippines, about typhoons that flooded entire streets, about his own father teaching him to fish before sunrise, about resilience that wasn't taught in classrooms. Dylan never said it out loud, but those car rides became the only part of his day where someone actually looked at him. One winter afternoon, that ordinary routine nearly ended everything. Heavy rain had turned the coastal road to glass. Ramon was driving carefully, hands steady, eyes locked on the road, when a delivery truck fishtailed across the center line. There wasn't time to think, there was only time to act. Ramon wrenched the wheel hard, taking the car off the shoulder and down toward the guardrail, instead of straight into the truck. Metal screamed against metal. The car spun once, twice, then stopped hanging half over the embankment, back wheel spinning over open air. Ramon's forehead was bleeding. His hands wouldn't stop shaking, but he twisted around immediately. Dylan, Dylan, look at me. The boy was crying, but he was breathing, unharmed, except for a bruise on his shoulder from the seatbelt that had done exactly where it was supposed to do. Ramon didn't wait for help. He kicked the door open, pulled Dylan free through the gap, and carried him up the embankment through the rain, away from the car that could have slid the rest of the way down at any moment. When paramedics arrived, Ramon refused treatment until they checked Dylan first. Mr. Whitfield arrived at the hospital, pale and shaking. He gripped Ramon's hand so hard it hurt. You saved my son's life. Ramon just shook his head. I was just doing my job, sir. No, Whitfield said quietly. You did more than that. For a while, it seemed like that moment would define everything. Whitfield gave Ramon a raise, a bonus, a promise that he'd always have a place at the company. And for years that promise held. But promises don't outlive the person who make them. Fast forward 11 years. Mr. Whitfield passed away after a long illness, and the company, along with the family, began to change. Dylan grew up. He went away to business school, come back polished, confident, and increasingly distant. The boy who once begged Ramon for stories about typhoons now walked past him in the hallway without a glance. Ramon told himself it was normal. Kids grow up, kids move on. He kept driving, first for Dylan's mother, then after she stepped back from the company, for whoever needed a car that week. He was good at his job. He was punctual. He was careful. He remembered which executive liked the air conditioning cold and which ones got car sick if the radio played anything upbeat. What Ramon didn't know was that a new executive named Foster Grant had been hired to modernize the company's operation, and that meant, in Foster's word, cutting the dead weight. Foster had never met old Mr. Whitfield. He had never seen Ramon's hand shake as he carried a bleeding 8-year-old up an embankment in the rain. To Foster, Ramon was a line item, an aging driver whose stories held up the schedule. He talks the entire ride. Foster complained to another manager. Every trip turns into conversation. I don't have time for that. He's been here almost 20 years. The manager said carefully. Then it's time for someone new. Foster replied. On a grey Tuesday morning, Ramon was called into Foster's office. He walked in expecting a schedule change. Instead, he found a folder waiting on the desk with his name printed on the tab. Mr. Cabrera, Foster said, not looking up from his phone. You talk too much. You're done here. Ramon blinked. I'm sorry. Clients have complained. You are friendly, sure, but this isn't a chat service. We need efficiency, not conversation. Foster finally looked up. Security will walk you out. 19 years compressed into a folder and a 5-second explanation. Ramon opened his mouth, then closed it again. He thought of Whitfield's promise. He thought of the words, you'll always have a place here. He said none of it out loud. Understood, sir, Ramon said quietly, and picked up the folder. He cleared out his locker in silence. 19 years of small things. A faded photo of his son's graduation, a rosary his wife had given him before his first day, a laminated card with the company's old logo. Back when it still felt like family. He placed everything in the cardboard box and walked to the parking garage one final time, past the car he had driven for 2 decades, and out into the cold. He didn't tell his wife right away. He sat in his old sedan outside their apartment for nearly an hour before found the words, they let me go. He finally said that night. His wife, Corazon, put down the dish towel and sat beside him. After everything you gave them? Ramon shrugged, though his eyes were wet. Loyalty isn't a line item, Cora. I should have known that. For the first time in 19 years, Ramon woke up the next morning with nowhere to drive to. He tried the usual channels, rideshare apps, private car services, referrals from old colleagues who still respected him. But at 60, with a resume that read, personal driver for 2 decades, most door closed quickly and politely.